So that's how we met. We started talking, and she was so lovely, and she was helping at the time, and still is helping her mom with, that would be her grandmother. So I said, oh, I said, I'd love to have you come to ACT sometime, and she did. That's why she's here today. We're very grateful. Please give her your full attention, as we would say in the courtroom when I used to be on the police department. Please, no sidebars. Give her all of your attention, please. And thank you. Thank you, Dr. Black.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good morning. And first, give an honor to God, who is the head of our life and the author of our walk every single day. I do want to acknowledge this beautiful soul, Miss Sharon. And it was lovely to actually meet you. The barbecue was very good that day. Well. We stood in line for hours, and if we were not delayed and standing there, see, this is how God works, and I'm going a different direction. Sometimes the inconveniences are meant for God's destination. And we have to actually really, really be mindful of those small inconveniences, because we would have never met. It was hot. I was contemplating, should I go? But just the light that you actually had that day actually drew me towards you. And so I just want to acknowledge that. So let's just jump right in. Okay. One second. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so the title of the presentation today is the roller coaster ride of emotions for caregivers. Can everybody agree that there are ups and downs, ins and outs when we actually caregive? Amen. So we're going to actually look at a brief look at the shock, the grief, the strain, and also the resilience that often shapes the caregiver experience. And so we do acknowledge that the journey is not straightforward. It looks a bit different based on the person, based on the caregiver, based on the entire circumstance of the stages of Alzheimer's, etc. So we'll go through all that.
Dr. Tamala, you'll let me know when to, what slides to go to.
Okay. Next slide.
Okay.
So caring for wisdom, compassion, and faith. So supporting aging parents and grandparents with Alzheimer's and even siblings, we actually just have to create a space for understanding and actually to create space for relief, but also practical support for ourselves as well. And so in this space, as we know, the space is actually safe. Whatever you say here stays here, but also we're allowed to actually have human emotions. Amen? Amen. Next slide. So caregiving often starts suddenly. Diagnosis changes the family story, and also turning everyday concern into a new role filled with questions, decisions, and emotions that few feel prepared to carry. I know when I began to actually see myself, the symptoms of Alzheimer's and dementia, what happens is denial is the first response. And so it's not really about the diagnosis, but it's those small messages, the repeated questions, the phone calls. I know all of you probably have experienced this one time where there's someone that calls you 2 or 3 times back to back and says, oh, I forgot. Oh, I meant to actually call someone else. Those small signs are not to be ignored. But sometimes because we're defended against pain, we don't want to actually move towards reality. So one is recognition, the second is actually diagnosis. And then the adjustment happens where life begins to actually reorganize in unimaginable ways. Next. So when we actually get a formal diagnosis, it's the shockwave of emotions. We are really navigating disbelief, denial. We actually ward it off to just forgetfulness, right? Especially in our community, we actually just really give it to old age, but we also understand that Alzheimer's is not a part of aging. If we actually look at biblical examples, there is nothing around memory issues in the Bible. So because we don't really know why
Good.
the human race is actually met with the
Write that
genetic
down and remember it.
factors.
You just walk around. You don't have to stay in one place. No, it's everything's out here.
Joey, get quiet.
Yes, so we don't fully know. Hopefully one day we'll actually find the root cause of it. But we want to actually take care of what we have and we'll go over that as well. So after the 9 months of sleep,
I'm trying, I can't find you. I'm sorry, I don't have my normal screen up.
it's okay, it happens, especially at home. Okay.
Oh,
So after
popcorn.
this,
I'll have some popcorn.
then fear happens very quickly, but also the last stage is grief. Because we're actually met with the reality that the version of the person that we actually carried in our mind and our consciousness in our previous memories is changed and it's no longer there. So, well, stay there. So next, in this slide, I just wanted to really highlight that the grieving process does not begin when the person is actually gone. It begins when the person begins to actually decline. The individuals that we once depended on, our mothers and grandparents, our covering, it brings a sense of fragility and vulnerability when we no longer can actually rely on those persons. So now we're actually navigating role shifts and role dynamics, and that can be very, very challenging as well. So after denial, we will actually go into sadness, also into anger and guilt, and then acceptance. But the reality is, this is not a stepwise, step-by-step process. We actually go in and out of these emotions over time. So one day, one season, you may be in denial, the next anger. Denial often comes up because Alzheimer's disease is insidious. So the person that you're caring for may actually be fully aware, fully vibrant, their memory is sharp that day, denial kicks in, right? And so that shift, it can feel like a whiplash. Next slide. So as I reflected before, some days feel manageable, others arrive with no warning. For many caregivers, uncertainty is the hardest part. Uncertainty, just in general, for human beings, is very, very hard for all of us. So, in regards to caregiving, especially if you're not really trained, if you don't have the support, such as this organization, it can feel very, very overwhelming and frightening. Next. So beyond the major milestones, caregiving is shaped by countless ordinary moments, repeating instruction, managing appointments, handling stress, and carrying responsibility that rarely turns off. Mind you, we have our own lives as well. Some of us have children. Some of us have church duties, right? Responsibilities. So we have all these parts, these rotating dynamics happening at once. And so Yes, next. I'll briefly just go over this again, but the guilt, the anger, and the resentment. The reason why the resentment piece is so key to really, really understand and begin to actually work through, because we're actually moving into the burden, right, of caregiving, right? The unfairness of caregiving, right? The limitations of caregiving. So the resentment is a natural part. And the reason why this is very important to really acknowledge is because if you don't work through these emotions, it does actually come up and it comes out in different ways. So next slide. So what we often really experience is chronic stress, the ongoing weight of caregiving responsibility as it accumulates over time, the hypervigilance, especially if the person lives on their own in the beginning stages. I know there are times where I was confronted with this reality, and even though all the breadth of education, it wasn't comfortable for me to actually sleep at night, right? I needed to actually, and I'll just segue for a moment. I had to actually install cameras all around in and out of the house because I knew that I needed to actually take care of my emotional life. I can't be two places at once. And I still need to actually generate income and actually take care of caseload of 35 persons. Okay. So you have to actually really evaluate what can I do to actually decrease my anxiety as well. So the next is the responsibility overload. If you can actually share and offload responsibility, that is going to alleviate stress as well. Next slide. So in regards to the hidden grief, grief is real and is valid. You're going through stages of the reality of that person, the functions of that person. So it's if you're actually introduced to different versions of that person that you've never met, especially when it comes to dependency, when it comes to feeding and bathing. So to actually really, really work through that process, because as a daughter, as a granddaughter, grandson, now you're parentified, right? And that can be uncomfortable as well. So also the loss of shared history, the memories and story, you begin to actually realize you can't quite connect to them in the way that you can connect to them. And that is a process of grief as well, especially when they forget that you were just in the room with them. So one of the things that I find is helpful is to actually speak about distant memories as possible. 9 times out of 10, they can actually remember the day you were born, but not remember what they ate yesterday. And so you have to actually build on what's there. Next slide. Next is the isolation of caregiving. Even with support around them, caregivers often feel profoundly alone. Fatigue builds up emotionally, physically, because there are a lot of private moments that you feel that you can't quite share, especially when you don't have the shared experience with another adult. So all of these processes, the loneliness, the exhaustion, the withdrawal, the isolation, the being on call, the shame also behind it is something that needs to be worked through. And that's why take full advantage of this community because a lot of people don't have it. Next, faith in caregiving. Caregiving is not about doing everything right because we won't. It's about loving faithfully. Faithfulness over perfection, presence over fixing, and God is always near the weary. We're allowed to get tired, right?
Thank you.
We're human. We're allowed to have boundaries. But in order to get to that place, we have to face our own limitation. If you're not able to face your own limitation, whether that's physically, psychologically, emotionally, or resource wise, you're going to actually overcompensate. Next slide. Caregivers are not only trained, they're also adaptive and compassionate and capable of finding new sources of strength when support becomes a part of the journey. The more support, the more resiliency. Next slide. So Alzheimer's changes the whole family. It affects families, not just individuals. Caregivers often neglect themselves, and understanding can reduce guilt and burnout. Faith and practical care goes together. Trusting God does not mean ignoring exhaustion or avoiding help. Next. So understanding Alzheimer's, and we're fairly familiar, but I thought, let's go ahead and refresh our memory. So Alzheimer's is a disease of the brain and progresses over time. It's very insidious. That means no doctor in this world can tell you the start, the ending of each stage, how long the person is going to live with it, because it looks so different. The brain is so fascinating because of the neural networks. It tries to actually compensate, it tries to actually rewire. So, and based on the personality, the lifestyle of the person, the education of the person, the more education that you have, the more learning you're doing, the more resistant the brain is to deterioration. So you have protein buildup, the cell structure changes, and inflammation happens also. That means the ventricle in the brain, the veins in the brain actually widen. So this is why nutrition is very important. So sugar is not going to really do us any good, because it's actually going to actually feed into inflammation. So this is why, and this is what is not really stated by a lot of medical doctors as well, the nutrition part is healing. So to actually connect to a nutritionist, to actually understand what foods is actually complementary to de-inflaming the brain. Next. Why does it matter? So education doesn't remove pain, but it removes self-blame. So the more educated you are on this, the more resourceful, the more resilient, and the more you're able to have self-compassion. So many caregivers silently wonder, am I doing this wrong? If you feel that you can do things better, reach out for answers. Because 9 times out of 10, just by really, really connecting, you'll find shared experience, you'll find solutions. And every day we're coming up with more and more solutions and more ways to actually help these individuals. So, and I'll get to medication eventually. Because there are medications that actually slow down the progression. So, but that's a whole nother subject, because you have to actually really, really reach out to your insurance network to see exactly what's covered, because often these medications are not offered because they're not covered and you have to pay out of pocket. So you have to ask for it. If you have the name, such as Remeron, they're not going to actually reflect that to you because they already know the limitation of your insurance. So you have to advocate for it. So Alzheimer's, well, we covered that. Let's go to the next slide. So early warning signs and neuropsych evaluation. So one of the things that I do besides psychodynamic psychotherapy is neuropsych evaluations. So what we want to do is keep in mind forgetting recent information, difficulty with familiar tasks, getting lost. I know, and I'll share this specifically with my situation, because I have education about it, but also real life experience. So my grandmother, she was still driving and she would actually get lost. And her journey coming home began to actually get longer and longer. So we had to eventually come up with a plan to actually gracefully separate her from her car. And that is a whole nother dynamic. You're actually find they still want their independence. So we have to do it with dignity and grace, okay? Even if it's hiding the keys. Okay. We'd just shoot for physical safety. So patterns matter more than isolated moments. Early identification allows planning and support. And this is why it's important for us to be mindful about our brain health too. Because especially if you have a genetic disease in your family, the prevalence rate is a bit higher, unfortunately. So one of the ways to actually do an evaluation is called a neuropsych evaluation or a cognitive exam. 9 times out of 10, what you're getting from your medical doctor is a cognitive exam. Neuropsych evaluations is more extensive and it gives you more information about the different areas of the brain, short-term, long-term memory, and usually they outsource this information, okay? So, and usually it's out-of-pocket fees, or they'll provide you with a super bill for reimbursement. So it's a comprehensive test of memory, attention, and language. It measures thinking, reasoning, and daily functioning, and a whole paragraph that I'm not going to read. Next slide. So warning signs and evaluations, we reviewed that. Next slide. So some brain activities that can actually support cognition is mental stimulations, such as puzzles and reading, learning new skills helps, strengthening neural networks. This is absolutely important. Above everything is social interaction, just because the language center of the brain. The first part of the brain that actually gets affected is the temporal lobes, which is language. So if you're isolated, you're not actually practicing receiving, processing, interpreting, and actually working through perception and language and verbalization. So if you're not exercising that, you're not actually building muscle and resistance. And so this is why daycare activities, church activities, anything you can actually incorporate at home is going to be absolutely important. Walking, balance, exercise. One of the exercises that I often recommend is walking and counting backwards at the same time, because it actually creates resistance. It's using two parts of the brain at once so they can actually begin to continue to actually talk to one another. Because what the network are doing is actually like, if you pull the plug out of the socket, you're not going to have any power. So it just kind of dwindles off, right? Just like the fall season. So also mindfulness and relaxation is going to be absolutely important. Deep breathing, because the first part, the front part of the brain, which is the prefrontal cortex, which is intention, planning, actually working through problem solving. If you're not working through that, then it's going to actually cause more confusion, less eye-hand coordination. This is why you see over time they cannot feed, eat, or bathe, right? So you want to actually really, really work through that. Also, engagement in meaningful tasks gives predictability, lowering anxiety, and helping a person feel secure. One of the activities that I actually incorporate in regards to mindfulness, because people don't really consider this, is painting. So I brought a lot of blank canvases and, paint blocks and brushes and things like that. So through that exercise, I would ask her to actually create something. And I would ask her to actually build on that. So for instance, she drew basketball court, because there's a basketball court in our backyard and we were back there. So I asked her to, like, okay, what day is it, right? Is there a sun? Is there clouds, right? Who's in there? Who do you want to add? Tell a story about it. Because I need her to actually begin to use her imagination. So things like that can be enjoyable and it's also part of mindfulness. Next slide. So supporting brain health, early medical care, managing blood pressure, diabetes, creating routine and structure, predictability, decreases anxiety across any situation. So also mental, social, and spiritual engagement. Next. Presence over perfection. So one of the things that I found is to actually speak very slowly, right? Sometimes I can speak slowly, sometimes speak really fast, right? You want to speak very slowly. You don't want to actually give a lot of options. And because the way my mind works, I can just go, do you want this, or possibly this and this and that? So you want to actually give one or the other. Would you like the black one or the white one? Would you like barbecue chicken, barbecue ribs? And also validation, right? Validation, just really securing, just like you would a child, right? Soothing, validation, it's okay, right? Safety also matters more than correction, right? So we want to actually make sure they're safe because usually what you'll find is when someone is agitated, agitation is a component of fear in anyone. So when someone is agitated, there is a baseline fear. So that tells us that what they want is self-soothing. They want reassurance. They want to know you're safe. It's okay. We don't have to make a decision at this moment. Let's revisit that later. You're home. Next. Setting the tone. So creating a safe space and actually creating grace for yourself. Okay. Next. So once again, we want to actually also always choose peace over being right. Okay. We don't want to use logic here, right? This is not a logic war. But we want to actually give them whatever they need to actually self-soothe, slow pace, redirect, ask for help. And this is also what I see, especially when there's a lot of dependence. And also, we want to be mindful of medication and your access to it as well, right? We definitely don't want to leave anything out where they can actually forget and take in. Next. Let's move to the next slide. All right, so this is just an overview in regards to how communication weakens. And this is why over time, we call it poverty of speech, where it takes longer to actually speak or recall certain words or even reply. So try not to actually rush to fill in space, but to actually give them time to actually find the words. If you interrupt that process, you're not giving them time to actually connect those networks. Next. And let's go to the next slide. So I believe I reflected this before. So it's just different areas of the brain. First area that is attacked is the temporal lobe, then the memory, which is the hippocampus, and then the frontal lobe. So you just really, really want to capitalize on older memories rather than newer memories. Next. So what we often encounter is repeated questions, trouble with finances and planning. And this is why financial education is important as well. To also, I'm going to make a segue, but I'm also going to make a disclaimer. I am not a professional in legal matters. However, we want to really, really understand, are all their affairs in order, right? In regards to bills, access to bank accounts, housing titles, because what I've come to actually realize, when you live in a home, the mortgage company, the city and state also know how old that person is. So you will begin to actually see the mail, the type of mail actually change. And so you want to actually make sure that things are in a trust. You understand any outstanding debt. You want to actually make sure that if anything happens, things are covered because they no longer have that ability. And if you're going to get a trust, you have to get it when they are at least by the stage 2, where they can actually write and say yes and confirm, because they have to sit at the table with their attorney. Side note, closure over. Okay, and then personality and mood changes. Next. And let's go to the next slide. Feelings over facts. So emotional memory lasts. Even as factual recall fades, the emotional imprint of the interaction endures. So one of the intriguing facts about Alzheimer's disorder, individuals with memory loss, they can't really remember, but they actually feel the emotional memory behind what just happened. And that's why self-soothing is going to be very, very important. Emotion, if you can remember, is always in the body, right? And the body feels, and then the thinking actually follows. But when the memory is not there, you still can feel emotional pain, right? You still can feel joy. You still see them light up when you're in a room. It's an emotion, right, that they have. And let's go to the next slide. So causes and risk factors. How are we doing on time?
Yeah.
Okay. So we also see the age as a risk factor. We see genetics as well, heart and vascular health, and also head injuries. And we also see this increase in athletes like football players and boxers.
Mhm.
Next. So some of the lifestyle environmental influences is a history of head injury, as I said before, lower levels of formal education, it's never too late, and social isolation, air pollution, sleep disturbances. I have to reiterate how important it is to actually have adequate sleep. One of the falsities about sleep, you never can make up sleep. Ever. You can actually be sleep deprived for 2 weeks and sleep for 2 weeks, and you'll never make up those 2 weeks you lost. And so that's why sleep is important, because sleep deprivation actually trains the brain to actually split off what it doesn't need, because the brain has to overwork what it doesn't recover. So we want to be sure you are sleeping, not only sleeping, but waking up rested. If you're still waking up tired, you're stuck in states 2 in the sleep cycle, and you're not really, really healing your brain. So God created rest for a reason. Yes. So non-modifiable factors, age, genetics, and family history. Modifiable resistance is diet, not smoking, reducing alcohol consumptions, management of chronic conditions such as diabetes, hypertension, hair protection, and stress levels. Okay, next. And let's go to the next one. Okay, so we want to actually live in the moment. Okay, just take it day by day. That's all we have. We can imagine what the next 5 minutes is like, but no one's have any idea. So to actually stay here in the present, but also plan for the future as well. So
I
to
have
set
something
your
to say to a lot of people out here. Please line up. And after the line is formed, that is done.
Being as a caregiver is so important
Mhm.
because as the person that we're actually taking care of is aging, we are too, okay? So we cannot forget that. Also leaning on others, family, friends, support groups. And if you don't have family support, we have to actually lay down our pride, okay, and open up networks and just really, really start connecting and bringing people in. You never know who God has sent in your life if you open your door. Next slide. So just a scripture for the journey. My grace is sufficient for you. And come to me, all who are weary. So these verses are invitations, not expectations. Yes. So we'll pause right there, but I do want to actually also reiterate one additional factor as well. Besides the caregiving portion, it is very important as soon as possible to ask the person that you're caregiving for their wishes for their home, their items. Yes, it's a very uncomfortable conversation, but these are also wishes that we need to actually establish as well for our own lives, no matter how old we are. And to actually get their input as much as possible. Because what I do find is that there's so many open-ended questions that actually cause complicated grief when you don't know what grandma or grandpa truly actually wanted when they had the opportunity to actually give you that information. So if you need their input, if you want their understanding of what would you like, what are your wishes, what do you want us to keep, what do you value, what do you want us to know? Also keep a journal, right? I bought a book and it's the book is titled Mom, I Want to Hear Your Story. And it's different segments of her life that I needed to actually know, the questions that we don't always ask, right? So if that is very important for you, please do make an intention to actually ask those questions. It could be a really fun activity. You know, who was your first date in 1950, right? So it's really, really just trying to actually create joy, even amidst the worry. And on that note, I'll pause there.
Thank you so much. I see now. I'm gonna stop the recording. Hold on. Dr. Black, I see now why